Hey friend, welcome back to Hey Wait. It's really good to be here with you again after that little break I took over the holidays. And during that time, I did sneak in one very special conversation that felt less like an interview and more like a homecoming for me. And I'm so excited to share it with you now. My guest is Angelo Lazenka. Angelo has been a wilderness rites of passage guide for 40 years, most of that time with the School of Lost Borders, which is a nonprofit devoted to vision quests, wilderness rites of passage, and nature-based training programs that support deep personal transformation. I first met Angelo when I was 24 years old and trying to figure out what it meant to be an adult and what it meant to be me. I did a vision fast and a training with the School of Lost Borders, and then I ended up guiding for them for a while. And then in my late 30s, I returned to serve on the board. So this work and the school, as it's commonly referred to in the rites of passage world, has deeply shaped who I am. And I want to introduce you to Angelo because he's one of the people who loved me into being myself. He helps shape the way that I listen, the way that I work with people, and the way that I trust what's trying to emerge through me as the years go on. And also because unless you're part of the rites of passage community, you've probably never heard of Angelo. And I want you to, because he's a remarkable human. The first time I saw Angelo guiding was during a co-ed training that I was a part of. And I don't remember the exact words that he was saying, but I vividly remember a specific moment when he leaned forward in his chair. He looked the person across from him in the circle directly in their eyes with tears welling up in his own eyes. And he spoke with such fierce love and such honoring that something in me rearranged itself. I'd never seen a man be so present and so emotionally tender and so embodied. Angelo loves poetry and myth and language, and he loves people. His devotion to rites of passage comes from a deep commitment to healing the lie that we are separate from nature, from one another, and from spirit. At 72, Angelo is stepping away from active guiding and entering a new chapter of elderhood. So this conversation comes to you from a liminal space. It's more shaped by questions than by answers, as we talk about rites of passage, adulthood and elderhood, and what it means to answer the call of your own becoming. One quick bit of orientation before we drop in. When Angelo mentions Stephen and Meredith, he's talking about Stephen Foster and Meredith Little. They're the founders of the School of Lost Borders and really the father and mother of modern day rites of passage work. And counsel, which comes up a few times, is an ancient practice of being in circle and speaking from the heart and listening from the heart to stories that are deeply personal and also profoundly universal. Okay, so if you're in a season of change, if you're standing at a threshold, if you're wanting to live in deeper relationship with what's shaping you and who you're being asked to become, may this conversation with Angelo help grow what's ripening in you and what wants to bloom. Thank you for being here. I notice my heart is beating fast and I just feel a whole lot of joy.
Yeah. And I'm just thrilled to be in conversation with you.
Yeah.
And that for me, that's what this is really about. It's like, my prayer is that the conversation that you and I evoke, because we both feel it in our hearts, will touch others' hearts. That we just got to let what we love speak for us.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And as you call that in, the other thing I feel compelled to call in is that it feels so strange to talk to you on a screen because
Mm.
so much of the time that I've sat with you in the last 20 years has been in a folding beach chair low to the ground in the desert in the mountains where we're like moving to either seek the sun or evade the sun depending on what season it is, and that's what feels the most natural. So I just want to call that in too as a way of holding us and also as an invitation to the listener to feel that the spirit of this conversation really comes from that. It comes
Yeah.
from all of that sitting in circle close to the land.
Yeah, and my part, I feel the same way. It's like so much of the time I'm in counsel I'm in conversation and in an inquiry with people about what this is. I really feel that it's the collective. It's all of us together just sitting there that evoke it. So that's the beauty of counsel. That's the beauty of the work and the way. And just to be sitting here in my little cottage, with you on the screen, there's a part of me just wants to call in all the people who are listening at the same time. Like, that even though I don't know who they are, that somehow their listening is going to affect this and
Yes.
affect us and affect this conversation.
Agreed. And I feel that so much when I sit down to do these. The nervousness is about the connection with you, but also the connection with the person listening and wanting to honor all of that. So maybe just to bring the listener in, for someone who isn't familiar with a rite of passage, can you say what a rite of passage is?
There are so many ways, so many different rites of passages. So in its simplest form, it is the mark and celebrate transitions and change. That's its simplest form. And almost every major religion has built-in ceremonies to celebrate rites of passages, from baptism to marriage to bar mitzvahs and I think that's been true throughout time in many cultures. And then many of us, I'm a baby boomer, many people growing up in Western cultures, a lot of ceremonies to mark change lost a lot of their juice and their deep meaning. And then I think the inquiry became us, how do we bring meaning back to this? And I want to also, like you said, birth and marriage and probably coming into adulthood, but also death. And it's like all those big, huge transitions used to be held community and by families and with so much context and presence, and it came to be like, what do I get for my, when I do my first communion, it didn't really have any depth and heart to it. So that's what I feel our rite of passage is the marking and celebration of change, so we can be as intimate and as aware and present to what's happening with us and to us as we can be.
That's the common understanding, as it
Mm-hmm.
were. But in the School of Lost Borders, where
Mm-hmm.
you've been a guide now you've been there for 30 some years?
I started at 32, so this is my last year working full time. Is my 40th year.
Beautiful. Yeah. This is off, I'm already off the train here, of the
Good.
questions, but when you say that, what comes up for me is what I said to you when we first got on today, which was when you and I first met, it was 2004. I was
Mm-hmm.
24. You were 51. And you had just kind of really stepped into
Mm-hmm.
holding this work. I called the school
Mm-hmm.
thinking I would get a secretary and I would ask some questions about what the programs were, and you picked up. And we shot the shit for, I don't know, 30, 40 minutes, and you were like, I think you should come at the end. And I was like, I think I should. And that was, and the reason I said yes to all of it was that it was the relationality of it. I felt you. I felt you feeling me. I felt the land. I felt, it was just alive and real in a way that at that time in my life, coming out of growing up in suburbia and going to the good school and getting the good grades, and then I got married, and I reached out to you the year after my divorce,
Mm-hmm.
24 years old and totally lost. And all I knew was in that moment when I talked to you on the phone, I felt this is a place that I think I could be found.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think just that teaches so much about what the school is. Both the essence of being like really personal and hands-on with everybody, and not making it formulaic in any ways.
Yeah.
Keep its flexibility and spontaneity and depth. And I'm sure that's true for almost every nonprofit, every organization that's mission bound. Like it's in love with what they do. It's like, how do we keep this real?
Mm.
This work at its core is spiritual, not psychological. You know,
Hmm.
and spiritual is an odd word too. But the truth of it's really about what does it mean to be what does it mean to know we belong and to feel our rightful place in our world, like that the belonging is both that we belong, that we're worthy, but also
Mm.
that what we have to offer is needed. That our expression is not something that we need to do necessarily, but that it's reciprocal. It's like we need to do it because we know it's needed. And again, that's if I can convey anything the time we're together, it's that reciprocal nature of everything. And again, that to me also is what a rite of passage is. A rite of
Hmm.
passage is that moment when there is change happening, and so you feel it internally, and you're doing the work for it, and at the same time, everything in your world is working you because it's also needed in the world. That shift, that change, that claiming, that presencing, that deepening, that opening, that shutting down, whatever is being asked of. It's never one way. And I often have said in the work, it's like if you're coming to do a fast, especially if you're coming here for a vision fast, which I have to say also, in honesty, I've never liked the name vision fast. But if you're coming here for that particular ceremony, I say, don't come here if you want to feel better about yourself or improve yourself. You know, but if you want to kind of get stripped down and honest and real and like really meet what's happening in your life, then let's talk. Let's let's get you out there, because again, it's nothing that happens in a circle. It's the 4 days and 4 nights alone in well, either Inyo Mountains for us or Death Valley or the Eureka Valley. It's that time being alone and being in the silence and just sitting there and being with it.
What you're saying, which is, you don't just go through one rite of passage. You don't just become an adult or an elder or a married person or a graduated person. This is about how we're always changing. It feels like the larger practice of the rite of passage is becoming.
So the first thing for me is that that's here is life is constantly initiating us. That's what you just said, basically. But there are times when that gets it bubbles up so much, that when we say we are marking something, it doesn't mean that we're creating something new. So for me, the simplest thing that I could say about what a vision fast is that it's a yes to engagement.
Mm.
You know, and the inquiry is, where does that yes come from? Who is it that's saying that yes?
Mm.
And what is the yearning? Where does that yearning meet the needs of the world? Or your community, or your family, or your life, or your child, or whatever it is. It's a celebration of uniqueness, but it's a uniqueness that allows us to take our rightful place in the wholeness of everything. Yeah.
Is
Is it?
that what initiation is for you? What
Yes.
is, yeah.
Yeah. Initiation also is what you just said. It's never ending, right? So this is just saying yes, stepping into it. You're initiating it, right? You're
Mm.
bringing it forward because it's always been there. It's been in you. It's been waiting for you, waiting to happen, right? We keep changing, and life keeps revealing its truth of who you are to you and of you, and you keep having to say yes and expressing it. And part of that expressing it is taking the time and the quiet to say, this is what it is, and I'm saying yes. and then, but saying that yes doesn't mean anything besides you have said yes to be worked, to become what you know you already are.
Right there. I was thinking that, so there are phrases that you have said over and over and over again, that live in my bones because of you. And the one that is the most alive always for me is and I might not be exactly this, but it's that which you've always been, but have yet to become. And you just kind of said it there a little bit. That which you've always been, but have yet to become. There's so many different directions I could go with that, but actually the place that I feel most called is, as someone who loves you, I'm curious for you, your 7 decades of becoming who you are now.
Mhm.
Looking back, because
Mhm.
there's so much we can't know until we look back. How were you always this, even
Mhm.
before guiding, even before the school?
Mhm. Well, that's a rough one. There's been so many past lives.
Yeah.
I was a chef in Manhattan before I became a guide. Two things come in without having to think about it. One is if I've always been moved by listening to people.
Mm.
I've always been, um, there's been a love and attraction to conversation, to people talking. And I think I've always longed to find ways to listen in a way that it changes how I express in the world. Even I grew up in a very small town, and when asked what I wanted to be a guidance counselor,
Huh.
because it was the only place I knew where people went and had conversations and understanding where they wanted to be in the world. And then later on I thought, well, maybe I want to be a priest. And then maybe later on I thought, maybe I want to be a therapist. But it's always been about being with people, being in conversation. You know, and I think that's kind of what has been innate in me my whole life.
That moves me because as you're saying that, I'm like, oh, you did all those things. You
Mhm.
you have been a guidance counselor and a priest and a therapist and all of those things in the work that you've done. It's all the way I feel it is like there's just all these layers of being
Mhm.
that have all been in the same expression.
And I was just really, really, really fortunate to fall into guiding, particularly falling into guiding under in the same traditions. Not this word I'm liking too much either, but in the same pathways as Stephen and
Mm-hmm.
Meredith, because they were. It was so not about them.
Mm-hmm.
It was there was no facade of being the therapist or being the teacher or being the guide counselor. It was so much more of an organic,
Yes,
more elective conversation, and
human.
it was nothing about us having the answers. And again, so much of this is common knowledge and common. I think so many people are living this way in so many different ways now, and in so many different professions. But it's no longer about being being right. It's so much more about finding a language that is life affirming, finding a way in being that is life affirming. It's one of the things I loved about listening to your podcast. That whole sense of let's wait. It's like this
Mm-hmm.
can't. We have to be aware of how much power there is in what we say and how we say it, and not just to people, but in here. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's one of the gifts of having a conscious rite of passage, having a held rite of passage, whether it be through an organization or through a family, doesn't really matter to me. Um, but it you know, it invites us into a conversation that's really hard to have because in that person I've always been that I yet become, it's here in us. We know it, and yet it's
Mm-hmm.
ripening. Another thing I could say about rite of passage, it's each individual knowing when it's time to bloom. It's like you've had it in you all along, and all of a sudden, things are happening, and you feel that this has got to come out now. I cannot not do this, and yet I don't know what this is. But being in conversation with that, you know, again, I love the word express, because it's like we have to express it, and in that expression we become it. And truth, that's all I say. Truth is a pathless path. Truth is only truth when you speak to it. You can't hold truth. Truth that's held becomes, I don't know what it comes, stagnant. Truth, when it gets held, when it gets like, oh, this is it, it becomes stagnant. It becomes fundamental.
Well, back to what you were saying there about the school and how it's always operated from this place that isn't stagnant, or trying to be in that truth of being with what is, and being humans together. The first time I came to learn there, the end of our training, I don't think I was the one who asked the question, but the answer was for me. It felt like, and the question was, how do we know when we're ready to do this work? And you said something to the effect of, you're ready because you see that it needs to be done and you're willing to step forward. And that, again, speaking of that 24-year-old me who all I knew was hoop jumping and getting certificates and how do I prove myself to someone? That hit me so hard as the most benevolent and wild permission anyone could ever give. And now that I'm a few years away from 50 and looking back at that and seeing you in front of me, the man who said that, I have to believe that that was something you were saying for yourself too.
Yeah, I mean, I've said so many times in so many ceremonies that I am the least likely person to be doing this work. I mean, I have absolutely no letters behind my name. I'm not a naturalist. I'm often embarrassed. People come and I get lost in my own backyard. And I'm taking people out to the wilderness where they go out on their own back. I've never even
But that's
backpacked.
what I love. I know that's what I love about you, is that you would think you're a huge backpacker and a an outdoorsman because you've lived your entire life in conversation with nature. But it's a completely different kind of conversation.
Yeah, and I think I missed maybe 1 year or two, but I fasted every year since I was in my early 30s. And part of that was, going out every year and like sitting with, what is this? Is this still right? Is this still mine to do? And if so, how am I meeting it? And it really helps. And even now, I don't push myself as hard as I used to, but I still go out and fast for 4 days and 4 nights every year, often by myself. And every year after doing it for over 40 years, I start getting nervous before, like the day before, the week before I start I know I'm going to go out. And even in going out, I have to look at a packing list because I know I'm going to forget something. It's like, and it really helps me when I'm working in a group not to be judgmental, or at least pad my judgments. Just remembering how liminal it begins to get and how potent it is and how much its own texture that threshold crossing has, to spend that time out. So it keeps me intimate with it. And that's again, to me, the intimacy of life is the most important thing. That's why claimings aren't about, that's why you want to keep saying it's not about self-improvement, It's about it's about being as intimate and as truthful and as real as we can be in our lives. That's the goal of this, because it's like, and to always know you never come to mark a transition like this just for yourself, right?
Yeah.
It's always reciprocal, and that whole idea of the person you've always been but yet become. It's like, it also means there's a way to serve in the world that you haven't begun yet, or you haven't met yet, or you haven't found a way to be more intimate with, or
Yeah.
deepen into yet, and it's, yeah.
You and I are both lovers of words and the importance of working with words and letting words work you. And as you said that, the words that I've been working with recently came up, which are stop being at battle with your own dignity. Stop battling
Beautiful.
your
Yeah.
own dignity.
Yeah. Beautiful.
And I'm wondering how, um, you said fasting every year was about kind of that checking in with, is this still mine to do? But I have to believe it was also every year a different claiming of coming closer to your own dignity in the language that I've been thinking about things through.
Yeah, I would say that every ceremony shapes the man I am. I think my the first one I went out on was really brought about by my parents dying. My mother died. My father died when I was 27, and my mom when I was 29. Um, and so that was huge for me. I really felt like I was kind of, again, a little cliche, but like I needed to reclaim a new kind of parenthood. I needed another holding, another way of being held. I knew I was never going to go home to my birth home, but that was really important to me. So yes, they really shaped me. But I have to sneak back into the whole word loving thing because you gave me
Do it.
yours, and one of mine really recently too about the work is a really simple word. It's called is admit because it means both being honest with and allowing in. And so to me, crossing the threshold is like you're admitting to, you know, because you're being honest about who you want to be in the world, what you are right now, like what's being offered to you, and you're also allowing it in. It has to be both all the time. It's like,
I love that.
and so admit it's been really big for me. Yeah. I don't know. Just when you
I
said that, I
love
wrote,
that.
oh yeah, I had one that
Yeah, yeah.
captivated me recently. What was it? And I couldn't remember. It's admit.
I was just thinking about the person listening now because you and I have been speaking a language of a ceremony that might not be familiar to people. Yeah, and just wondering if there's a communal kind of longing for that sense of being initiated, of
Mhm.
being a part of something, of belonging. And so as I say that, I wonder if you could speak more to how that being admitted um, is is a is a practice for living.
Like it goes back to being the word yearning. Like to really, probably for many people, it's having the courage to go against a kind of a cultural numbness and unwillingness to celebrate life. We've really lost a sense of what grief and celebration is. Like they both, I think on both sides of it, they've been damaged. They've been misinterpreted, or we've allowed our fear of our living and dying to capsulize somehow, or to make small of it all. Or another one of my often said things is from a David White poem. We shape ourselves to fit the world, and by the world are shaped again. The visible and the invisible working together in common cause to create the miraculous. So I know I'm going off on tangents, but it really is. We're asked the basic question is what is it to live our true nature? What drew me to the work wasn't so much that it was in the wilderness, to be honest. It was because they were trying to heal the lie of separation. And so how do we begin to express as part of this wholeness, and to be in that inquiry of like to celebrate beautifully our uniqueness without it becoming an individuality that separates us from something.
When you say the lie of separation, are you speaking of being separate from nature, from each other, from our true selves, all of it? Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why I say that's why every question is open for, we could, every single question we ask, we could sit in council with for a few hours. And that would be so healing. As I really talk about what's important. Again, I can refer back to your work. This is what you've been doing for a long time now. And
Yeah.
it's like, how do we just and see what's really going on? What are we really trying to say here? You know?
I think this is why I told you before we started recording today, I said every time in the last few days that I've sat with what do I what do I want to ask you, or what it's going to be like to sit down and talk with you, I would get moved to tears. I couldn't think of the question or the conversation. It was it was this deep longing to be able um, to be able to convey a feeling tone that I have gotten
Mm,
in being with you, in being in ceremony, in being on the land. And I don't know what the words are to
mhm.
try and convey that the love and the gratitude and the honor and the connection that gets evoked anytime I sit with you and just talk about these ideas,
Mhm.
much less be steeping in them in an intention on the land.
You are speaking you're speaking from what's important, not about what's important.
Mm.
Just bringing that much presence and honesty and rawness and, you know, bare boneness to conversations is what it is. So we can never name it, but if we
Mm.
stop trying to name it, we're in trouble.
Mm.
We need to steepen this. It's like
Yeah.
we don't need to name this. It's not about naming and defining. It's about steeping. Another one of mine is, the difference between tea and tincture is time and darkness. Uh, it came to me. It came to me. It came to me in a fast. And we need to steepen it. We need to pull out the medicine of the conversation. Not try to define it or name it.
Thank you. Yeah. I was having lunch a few months ago with a friend of mine who's fasted at the school of Lost Borders, and she's 50, and
Mm.
she said she was laughing about how she said I feel like I'm a baby elder.
Mm.
um, and I feel like our culture is pretty bereft of elders
Mm.
um, who hold that as consciously as you have been practicing to do for so long. Um, so I wonder if you could speak to what you have learned in claiming elderhood.
Mm. Well, as we've been saying, the claiming is walking through the doorway towards something. Which is what we've already said. That's the initiation. And I would say that I foolishly and claimed elderhood at 50, and I would say I haven't even touched the fringes of it until I turned 70. My sense is that 50 is often one of that decade is often one of the most engaged decades I hear in people in some ways. They're often free of a lot of things and they don't need to prove much about themselves anymore. If they've had kids they're raised and they've had careers that are pretty stabilized in them, and that's not true of everybody. But it has been true for most people I come in that decade is a decade where they feel their belonging and their presence and their effect in the world really fully. You
Mm.
know, it was definitely true of me. I mean, the year I turned 50 and I claimed elderhood, it was also the worst year of my life. Some ways. Stephen died. My marriage fell apart. And I moved to Big Pine and was living out of my truck for that first year. So when you met me, had been homeless for over a year, just finding my way. And that's another thing we need to talk about right at passage is that often it happens in chaos.
Mm.
Especially if we want to. There's no sugarcoating of this. It's like the same thing about dying. I just threw a quote on my Facebook page yesterday about dying, and it's really about so many people turning into their dying open up and live more fully than they probably ever lived before. And that's so much about what rites of passage is that we have to die to old personalities in order to fully live into the next one, you know? And so I would say the same thing you said about elderhoods, about adults. How many true adults are there in the world? The people who are doing what they're doing just because it's obligation or they want more in their lives, but who are really in that to make the world better, because that part of adulthood is their stewardship years. So for me now, at this stage in my life, what elderhood means for me is what is actually happening to me. That's why I think it feels more potent to me now that I'm in my 70s, is that I've been letting go of the work for years now. I feel like my place now is I am aware that at my age, with my energy level, I do not have what it takes to help shepherd us as a human species. But I have enough compassion and love to love those who do. So I feel like that's stepping outside the circle of those people who are in their 50s and their 30s who really feel the call and the passion. And there's so much need right now. There's so much to meet right now that I don't want those who are called to the new story, to the repair, to the regeneration, to the new conversation, to the love. I don't want them to burn out. So to me, part of that elderhood is, and that's the difference. We've just been getting old and going to nursing homes, and no one listens to old age. And the people who are getting old don't want to pretend they're not, and continue to be eternally young, Peter Pan syndrome. But to be outside of the workings is a way to hold containers so they can be as present as they can be to meet what needs to be met. And so to me, that's what elderhood is for me now. And two young men I know are doing the men's fast this year, and I'll sit in as an elder witness for them. And bridging things. I feel like I'm there to help bridge people's practices and ceremonies and and the grace of not having I can't do the hard work anymore. Not really. I know that if I was keeping base camp for somebody and somebody needed to be carried back in, I'm not the one that's going to be fire carrying somebody back in anymore. So, yeah, I'm kind of go off on odd tangents on you, I think.
No, I think that's the thing. This whole conversation has felt like just steeping in all the same kind of mysterious questions that don't really have answers. And as I was listening to you describe what elderhood has been and is for you now, the thing that I was really feeling into was, I've put words to this. I think one of the things that moves me about you and the other people who I've been lucky to know at the school who are doing this work and fasting every year is that I really do get the sense that you have tracked yourself well, that you've stayed close. And when you were talking about being an initiated adult is essentially being a true person, a person true to your own self. The underlying piece is how do I live a life that's mine?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things that expresses itself as that just welling up of tears in me as I think about talking to you is that you have sat with thousands of people over all these decades who were asking that question, how do I live the life that's mine and give the gifts that are mine to give?
Yeah. So one of the things that it's being evoked in me is I remember when I first started doing this work and sitting in council. I think one of my biggest healings was I realized how hard it was for everyone else, in addition to myself. I could start a council out with saying, what are your biggest challenges and your faults? And people would jump in and we would be in council for hours and I would turn around and say, what are your gifts and how are you offering them to the world? and there'd be silence. And I think that that's another part of the Western culture. We've been so inundated with saying that we can't speak of our own beauty. The gifts that we were given are not ours to hoard. They're ours to allow. I often say that's part of the rites of passage is co-creative allowing. Because it's not just you allowing, it's a co-creative process. And when you were saying express your truth, it's like, again, if this oneness is greater than the sum of its parts, then our claiming of our uniqueness is how we take our rightful place in the sum of its parts, right? We are that part of the wholeness.
The thing that sticks out for me in what you just said is how difficult it is to name our gifts, to speak to our beauty, to speak to what is whole, what is good, what is what is ours truly to give. And so I just want to name that again before we close our conversation, because I think there's so many morsels that I hope the person listening walks away with from this conversation. But that feels really important. The invitation to get better at letting that be expressed. Looking for it, looking for the ways to forge it. And with that, I want to say thank you to you, Angelo, because you, sitting across some circle with you when I was 24, you granted me permission to start looking for what is it in me that's unique and beautiful that I have to give, and the intimacy of someone holding that and blowing on that ember. That's one of the reasons why I will always love you and be grateful for you, because of that holding then and how it still lives in me now. So it's been just such an honor to get to sit with you today and share you.
So I don't want to extend this too long, but I have to be honest. And before you start speaking, so yes to intimacy and yes to relationality. Everything is in relationality to everything else. And that's conversation. I think for me, in our ending, I want to evoke for another teaching for me. And it's how I could look at it as the difference between my personal story and allowing myself to be mythed. My favorite definition of myth is something that has never been but is always happening. And it goes along with the person you've never. So creation myths they're a creation myth because what's being evoked in those myths is always happening. It's not happening in the past. And so for me to end with it, this is us mything ourselves into our humanness by telling our stories, and we're trying to speak to something that's never been and is always happening, and we're being shaped by that. And by our expressing it, we are shaping it. So again, relationality and intimacy is the right way. And thank you for this. Thank you for the opportunity to do something I almost always way too afraid to do. And it was my love and trust of you that brought me to the yes to come here and talk today. So thank you.
My absolute honor and pleasure. Thank you so much, listener, for being here today. I hope something resonated with you and helps you to have a good experience of yourself in your life and your relationships, because you really do deserve that. And if someone came to mind while you were listening today, could you take a moment and share this episode with them right now? And if you haven't had a chance to yet, please leave a review for Hey Wait, because both of those things help new people find the show. And it means a lot to me to be able to reach and connect with new people around this work. With that, if you have an idea for a guest or a topic, or you have a question for me, feel free to reach out to me at Hey Wait with Jay on Instagram. Hey Wait is produced by Viv at First Click VA, and the original music is by Dalton Grant. And hey wait, before we go, I want you to remember, your insights matter, and the right people will meet you there. So stay with yourself. and I'll see you next time.